Welcome to how you can train robots, how to go from zero to hero with data-driven automation on Google and Facebook ads. My name is Jared Flegel. I'm the Director of Marketing here at WebMechanix. Very excited to be joined by our partners at Tomi.ai today. A quick housekeeping item. We want to make sure the session is value-packed for you guys as possible, so we got a lot of content to cover today. So please make sure you drop your questions in the chat. We're going to have 2 stops for Q&A. So please start up in the chat with those questions, and we'll make sure to cover as many of them as we can before the hour is up today. Without further ado, very excited to dive in today. Let's meet our presenters. Josh, if you want to go first and introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Josh Muskin. I'm the Executive Director of Media Strategy here at WebMechanix. I've been with the company for the last coming up on 11 years, and most recently have spent the majority of my time doing more or less exactly what we're going to talk today, trying to take whatever the next steps are to help our paid media clients and even ourselves take performance to that next level.
Josh, welcome. And Konstantin.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Konstantin, the founder and CEO of Tomi.ai, a predictive marketing platform. Before that, I used to be Senior Director of Marketing Technology at Compass in real estate. And before that, a CMO of a large e-commerce company, a marketplace in CIS. And beyond that, I'm happy to be on the call with Josh, who is a runner himself, and I also like to do some triathlon for pleasure.
Awesome. So today, guys, we're going to talk about how you can train robots. We're going to do a quick primer on that. Then we're going to dive into some practical considerations for how to do this on Google versus Facebook. Then we're going to give you guys some DIY robot training tips, so how you guys can start to leverage the algorithms of Google and Facebook starting today. And then we're also going to talk about how you can level up for transition to automation. We'll talk about some tips and tactics there. And then finally, we're going to give you guys the inside scoop on the ultimate accelerant for data-driven automation, which we'll be very excited to walk you guys through. So without further ado, Josh, if you want to take it away and talk about how to train robots.
Thank you, Jared. So we're going to go through kind of a quick primer here. What is this that we're talking about? What does it mean? What are the nuts and bolts of it? The big idea is to tell Google and Facebook, or really whatever ad platform you're working with that has automation available, what's working and what you actually want. What most advertisers are doing today is they're effectively communicating to the platforms with their data. Hey, we got a bunch of leads. Go find more people like that. But in reality, we don't actually just want the leads. We want the couple of them that actually turn into customers and give us some revenue. So what we're working towards now is a world where we get to say, hey, we got 400,000 or 4,000 leads. That's cool. But these 25 are the valuable ones. They turn into customers. Go ahead and give me more just like those instead of the whole. And when you start to integrate that type of data into the automation available in each of these platforms, on average, Google did a study that said you'll get about a 20% incremental revenue lift and a 30% lower cost per lead, cost per action, whatever it is that you're tracking. And we've seen even larger wins than that in practice, doing this specifically in Google and Facebook over the last 6 to 12 months. There are really 3 key things that we're going to focus on here for how to put this into play with either yourselves or your clients. First one we're going to talk about is going to be funnel math, understanding how people make their way from the click that gets to your website all the way through to the revenue that they've made you. The data piping, which is really the connection of all of that data. And the third one is IOIs and IOQs, which are indicators of intent and indicators of quality. It's really easy to think that says LOL, but I promise it doesn't. So when we talk about the funnel math, this is simply a graphic provided by Google, but yours is going to look a little bit different. The general idea, though, is that we all have steps that happen between lead and close deal. The only exception to this would be e-commerce, where a purchase is a purchase, and okay, fine. But if we're working in a B2B environment, we've got leads. We generally have some sort of qualifier. We have some segment of those qualified leads that sales will actually accept because they have the budget and the correct timelines. And then you have the even smaller portion of them that become closed-won deals. So it's imperative to understand how many leads do you need to get that marketing qualified? How many marketing qualifieds do you need to get a sales accepted? How many sales accepted you need to get a closed-won deal? And you can replace any of those terms with what your individual funnel terms are. And we'll get to where you actually use this information here in a second. But none of that's all that useful unless you have an automated way to tell the platform each of these individual steps along the way. And so data piping comes in handy when we start to pass really two, in this example, critical pieces of information, one from Google, one from Facebook, and it's their unique click ID. So each platform will generate a click ID that happens every time the user clicks the ad. You can capture that ID when the user hits the landing page, pass it through when they submit your form or your action, and then log it inside of your CRM. That is the individual ID that is required to go back to the platforms and say, this individual user from this click in this session on this ad was the one that drove this revenue, versus just saying, hey, revenue happened here, kind of guess where it came from. So you can get really specific with what you're telling the platform, but if and only if you've saved that data from that first click and passed it all the way through your CRM in such a fashion that you're then able to send it back. And IOIs and IOQs are going to be a lot of what we talk about today in our DIY section. It's giving people ads, pre-form, and post-click experiences that generate useful data signals to the platforms, such that you can qualify users on the front end of an experience instead of having to wait until after you've already paid for the lead. So some live examples of this on clients that we've worked with. The example you have in front of you are, this one's for a debt consolidation client. They will only take clientele who have over $10,000 to $15,000 in personal debt. So we put on the form, how much debt do you have? And we allow people to tell us what that number is so that we can get a sense before they even click continue and get to the part of the form where they're giving us information, if they're quality or not. And that's a signal that we can send back to Facebook or Google in the event that we're not getting quite enough people filling out that ultimate form. We can give them instead the information of, here are all the people raising their hands and saying that they're qualified. Let's see what happens if we increase that audience. A similar but different example is a financial advisement subsidiary from Motley Fool. They only accept people who have $500,000 or more. So it's the very same thing. They have their standard form. They ask that one singular qualifying question, what's your investable asset? And if they select that $500,000 or more, then we can mark them quality. We can send that signal to the platform. We can use that as something even before they submitted that form to aid in our automation. And we can also disqualify anyone who selects under that number in the same way. So what does this look like from a visual perspective? I'm using Meta and Facebook as the example, but you could replace their logo with Google Ads or LinkedIn or really anything for that matter. But current state, like I said, usually people are just saying, hey, I've got leads, go get me more leads. And that flow looks just like this. The user comes from a platform, they get to a page, your landing page, it's got some information on it. There's a form probably. That lead submits that form, and that lead's information goes to two places. It goes to Salesforce or your CRM, whatever that might be. And it also triggers a conversion event to Fire that's sent back to Google Ads or Facebook in this case. It says, hey, we got one. And that's cool. But this is probably what it should look like. And you'll see a bunch of new steps in here. So now in between platform and landing page, we have three additional things. So something that we call preform is essentially something like this. It's a piece of interaction or a piece of information that can be collected that happens before they have to actually submit first name, last name, email. We get that piece of information that is in of itself a qualifying question. There is always a sort of correct and incorrect answer based on what we know about our leads and if they are or are not quality. If that person is quality, meaning they selected over $10,000 in debt or over $500,000 in assets in the examples we shared, then we send them to the full form for all of their personal identifiable information. They submit that form and we send them to our CRM and we submit that conversion event to Fire back to the platform. If they select sort of the incorrect or unqualified answer, we still send them to the page. We still allow them to submit the form and go to the CRM, but you'll notice the key difference is we're not firing a conversion at this step. It's a filtered way of being able to only tell the platforms when a quality thing happens, but still allow the users a reasonable experience, even if they select the unqualified piece, to make it all the way through the funnel. And then we can just choose to either ignore them or nurture them in a different way, or something that is less hot to the sales folks than someone who has said all the right things, answered all the correct qualifying questions. Those are the ones that we both want to act on from a sales perspective as priority, but that we also want to tell the platforms we got from them in hopes that they optimize towards more of those quality hand-raising users versus the ones who are selecting the lack of quality answer. At this point, I'm going to leave this up here just for a second and you can jot it down or go here on your own. This is an assessment that we put together that basically gives you an understanding of if you and your tech stack and the current platforms that you're running and ads that you're running are set up and able to do something like this, or if there are going to be other steps. So there's 4 questions on here. It'll guide you through what your answer should be, and it'll be pretty clear by the end of it if you're eligible to create something like this, or if there's other work to be done in between there. So have at it. All you need is your email to go ahead and download it. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us about it too, but it'll help you understand how close you are to this or how close you are to this. Leave that up here for just a second, and then I will move on.
Yep. I also dropped it in the chat, guys. So if you follow that link in the chat, it'll take you right to this office.
Perfect. Thank you. Even better. So that's all pie in the sky stuff. It probably makes sense conceptually, but you're like, all right, well, what do I do with that information? So let's talk a little bit more practically about Google and Facebook, how they differ and what you might do in between them. So if we look at them from the platform perspective, they're very different from one another. Google ranks ads based on their relevance to the users. They have a super high level of intent because people are actively searching for their problem. They are a bid-based platform, meaning it's more or less highest bidder wins in the right scenario. They have much higher CPMs and cost per lead than something like social or native or display, mainly because of that level of intent. You are and should be okay with paying more money for someone who is saying, I need your product right now, just give it to me, than you would be for someone who you're trying to convince that you might be the right option. And they look at things from a 30-day attribution window. Meta's sort of the total other side of that. They are audience-based instead of bidding-based. They tend to have really inexpensive CPMs and CPLs, especially if you play your cards right, but they also look at a much shorter window of a 7-day attribution. So you know that people getting attributed to your social networks in this case are they're much closer to that original click than maybe Google was. And that 7 day is actually a change from what used to be 28 days prior to the iOS updates that came out last year, but we're working in a smaller window now. So when you look at them from an advertising perspective, which is what we're all here to think about, what can you actually do? What features can you use? What are you considering inside the platforms that can help you get to some of those flowcharts that I showed earlier? So both of them have been really forthcoming in recent months and years to say, hey, stop doing granular targeting. Stop creating dozens and dozens of ad groups and ad sets. Stop doing single keyword ads. What you really should be thinking about is putting as much data as possible into a single campaign or the smallest number of campaigns that you can generate. That's going to be true for both of these, but they look at them through a slightly different lens. Google has launched something called Performance Max campaigns. There's effectively no targeting other than geography, more or less. They will ask you for a bunch of assets, both video, display, search. They'll ask you for some keywords. They'll ask you for a link to your website, and they will take that information and use their machine learning to go out and combine the assets you've given them to show in what they believe is the best possible placements, whether it's on Google Search, Google Discover, YouTube, Google Display Network. But they do that very similar to what Facebook has come out and said, which is, hey, don't make dozens of ad sets. Just put your biggest relevant audience into a single group, the smallest number of ad sets, because you need 50 events per week per ad set on the Facebook side to get out of their learning phase, and let us sort of do the automated work for you. So both of those things are very true for either of them. The things that are critical for both, we wrote it here for Google, but it's really true for both. A really tight CRM integration, especially if you're optimizing towards an event that is down that funnel math string past lead. And the key difference here is the number of events that are needed. Google requires 30 events per month, ideally double that, but 30 events per month, bare minimum per action. So that could be per demo form, per asset landing page, which would then make you eligible to use some of their bidding automation. Facebook requires much, much more, 50 events per week per ad set, not necessarily at the account level. So when you're thinking about, am I setting myself up for success, one of the things you have to think of is, what's my budget? And is my budget going to get me to these data minimums that are going to allow me to leverage this automation, which I know is going to help? So if you had $100 cost per lead on the event that you wanted from Google, you need 30 of those per month at minimum, right? You can do your math there and then figure out if my budget is significantly higher or significantly lower than that. You can do the same thing on Facebook for those events. So that's one way to just kind of gut check. Are you even really giving yourself a chance by using enough budget in the right places? Or do you need to start really considering that account simplification and consolidation of your campaigns to be able to put the correct budget against those events that are needed. So here are 5 really tactical things you can do after you leave this webinar today. First thing, if you haven't done this already, it's step number 1, doing your funnel math, figuring out if you've got one customer and their average customer lifetime value is blank, how does that work back up the chain? How many qualified leads did it take to get there? How many MQLs was that? How many raw leads was that? How many clicks was that? Because there is a maturity continuum to this whole thing. There are going to be people who have a ton of data that can use every automation tool available to you. And then there are going to be some that don't, that you're not going to meet the 30 conversions a month minimum. You're not going to have the budget to get there, given your industry. And if that's the case for you, this is a really incredible tool because it will give you quite literally, by doing that reverse math, your maximum allowable CPL per step in the funnel. So you'll know, based on your customer lifetime value, based on the number of leads required to get that single customer, that you can't possibly pay more than X dollars per lead, because if you do that, you would immediately be in the red on that lead for the revenue that you would expect. So it's a super valuable tool either way. One, because it can give you that maximum allowable if you have to do things manually. The other, it can give you a sense of which event you can actually optimize towards, depending on if you have enough of those events coming through. But it's something you should do once and something that you should update at minimum quarterly, given sales performance is going to change, market factors change, that type of thing. And there's a link here that you can use. It'll be passed out at the end of this presentation too. It will basically give you this template for you to be able to go in and fill out yourself. That way you don't have to create your own. Second one we talked about at the beginning, it's adding that qualifying question. The easiest place to find this is to go ask your salespeople, what's the one thing you would ask your prospects to make sure that they were good or not, and to figure out if you were going to waste your time or not on the phone with them. A lot of times you'll come up with 2 or 3 questions, but usually there's one that will do 80% of the work for you. Are these the right people or are they not? And that's something that can be really easily integrated into your form. It's not going to change your conversion rate all that much, especially if the question is kept very simple, like 2 that are displayed here. But it can give you that really key bit of quality information to say, hey, maybe I don't get 50 form completions per week per ad set, but maybe I get 50 people that click this first button. And we can use that as our event. Third one, there's a ton of development cost you could dump into this kind of thing, but there are also some integrations out there that'll make it really easy for you. So linked here, 2 of the most common CRMs that we work with, Salesforce and HubSpot, both have native integrations with Google Ads to be able to do all of this event passing and data piping for you just by setting up using account IDs and that kind of thing, sort of point and click versus having to actually pay someone to do some detailed development. On the Facebook side, you're looking at working with someone and or doing it yourself to set up CAPI or conversion API and enhance conversions. These are the best possible ways to get the maximum and most accurate data back into the Google Ads platform and the Meta Ads platform. Your pixels are great. These are going to be a little bit better. You'll have a higher match rate. You solve a little bit for the data loss post iOS 14.5 if you're running on Facebook, particularly in a mobile app of sorts, and it helps you most real time get that post lead data back into the system versus you could do a manual import. It will work, but the further away you do that manual import from that click, the less impactful that data is. So these APIs will give you a much more real time access to that information. And then lastly, track consistently. So this is certainly not necessary, I suppose, but it will save you a ton of sanity. Certainly. So you can email us, we can give you a template for this, but if you have things like Google Analytics events, those events should be written exactly the same as your Facebook events and exactly as the same as your events being pushed into Google Ads to optimize off of. There's also the realization that Facebook has many standard events. They have add to cart, they have purchase, and it's all very e-com focused, but it can all be manipulated to B2B or software sales as well. And those standard events get a lot more attention, and Facebook has a much better understanding of how to weight them versus if you went out and made a bunch of custom events. So using something like Tag Manager to have a singular trigger that fires the same named events to all of your sources will simply help in understanding comparison between them. It'll make it really easy to manage, and whoever manages those events for you, just sort of a nice data cleanliness thing that, again, you don't necessarily have to do, but it will save you a massive headache as you go to update these things into the future. So how are we leveling up the transition to this? Shameless plug, you could work with us to do that. We've been doing this very very intimately with probably our top 30 to 50% of our clients. And over the last couple of years, we've really just kind of gotten on the ground floor running. We have a process for this that we use over and over again that works just about every time. Because of that process, we can do it quickly. And because of the capabilities we have an internal development team that knows how to do this like the back of their hand versus having to teach someone internally how or go how to do that. I was afraid the dog would bark. Sorry. And then when we start talking about things like scale, we've had clients easily go from low 6 figures to 7 figures because you really start to unlock the ability to get to audiences that seem really big and really broad and really scary when you're using a really concise data measurement strategy, because these platforms are able to understand in real time this data much faster than any of us can. And by doing that and creating some really statistically significant correlations between the click that you want the platform to drive and the revenue that you know that you have, the platforms have a lot more confidence to go out and find a much broader audience than you had before. So scale gets unlocked much more easily than the manual approach. And certainly perspective, we see things differently than most of the people that we work with, just because we work with 70 other clients too. So we have exposure to what worked over here that might work over there, and we're able to share that back and forth across whatever clientele or industry it might be. And we've done this with a lot of people and some big names in the business. We've had folks at Amazon, folks at Frontier, Gong, Acquia, subsidiaries of Motley Fool. They're all spending considerable amounts of money, and they're doing this strategy mainly because it works for them. And it was scary for some at the beginning because it's unknown and it's sort of entering the black box that Google and Meta give you and trying to give them a little bit of power. But you can still retain a lot of that control simply by doing a really good job and a really concise job of measuring the data that you're giving them and making sure it's the clean data to give them, and really tying the efforts that you're putting into the outcomes that you're getting.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. That was fantastic. Before we move on to the ultimate accelerant for data-driven automation and pass the mic to Konstantin, wanted to give a quick stop for Q&A. So feel free to drop your questions, thread up in the chat, or if you also have a dog and want to share what breed it is, feel free to drop that in the chat too. So Oliesia has a question. Josh, thank you for the tips. If I could implement only one of your tips, which one will give me the biggest uplift and why?
Ooh, only one. I'll give you 1.5 because one is critical, but it won't work without the other. If it's on Facebook, implementing CAPI if you haven't already, or the conversions API, or on Google, the same thing as the enhanced conversions that they have access to. That's sort of the, you have to do that for a lot of the automation to work because of the real-time nature that data is passed. But if you do that, the next thing to say is consolidate your accounts. Take things from however many campaigns and ad sets and ad groups you have and put them into the smallest number of them possible. Put as much data as you possibly can into one singular spot and give these platforms that data that it really needs and deserves to go out and do a lot of these activities that it's promising. It becomes increasingly difficult the more disparate your campaigns and structure is. So for example, Google Ads, you should really only make different campaigns for one of 2 reasons. Very specific budget requirements. You have to put XYZ amount of dollars to thing A versus thing B, and geography. If you don't have different geographies and different budget requirements, you can have one campaign with a bunch of different ad groups inside of it. On the Facebook side, it's the same thing. We just got back from a conference at Meta HQ, and their opening statement was, if you go home and do nothing else, the one thing you should do is consolidate your accounts into the smallest number of campaigns and ad sets you can, within reason, obviously, to give those individual sections the most possible data to automate off of.
Awesome. Thank you. Kelly and Lauren from eTown Hub ask, what would you recommend as a minimum ad spend for both platforms to see results?
Good question. There's no great answer to that. The way that you would find out a good starting budget is you would take your expected cost per action. So if you have historic data and you know that a demo costs you $110, or you know that a resource download costs you $50 or something, you take that cost and you multiply it by at least the minimum amount of data required to use automation. So on Google, you take that cost, you multiply it by 30. On Facebook, you take that cost, you multiply it by 50, and then by 4.5 for number of weeks in a month, and that'll give you the minimum cost to run for that conversion objective with one set of targeting. And then you multiply that for each new set of targeting that you would want to add, or each new dramatically different creative concept that you would want to add. And that'll give you a general sense of where to start. If you do that math and you're like, no way, that budget's simply not there, then you kind of just have to start with what you have, but instead of optimizing towards that $110 demo, you might optimize towards the people that clicked the right answer on the quality question. You'll get more of that, it'll be slightly less inexpensive, but you need to start with the expected cost of the action and then do the multiplication against the required amount of data points to give the platform to use any of these features. And that'll give you a good sense of, if you do that, you're giving yourself a chance to succeed, minimum budget.
Jim has a Vizsla, which is a super cool name for a dog breed. I don't think I've heard of that one before. And his question is, with Performance Max, are we basically moving all our keywords into that instead of the various campaigns and ad groups? If so, love that.
The answer is yes, but they should still be very relevant to each other. Like if we were doing ads for, oh goodness, I don't know, Petco or something, you wouldn't put dogs, cats, and fish keywords all into the same thing. That would be like a bit too much. With Performance Max, the way they allow you to break it up is with content groupings. So when you give them a bunch of different assets to create this, you give them a bunch of different images, headlines, videos, what have you, and you create these groups of assets that all center around more or less a single landing page or a single offer that you're trying to give. The keywords you're associating should be specific to that content grouping, because it's going to use those keywords and whatever landing page you give it to figure out where those assets from that content grouping should go. So yes, generally, if you were breaking out ad groups by like the adjective appended to the end of your core phrase, like you don't have to do that anymore, but you would still want to group keywords within a reasonable grouping to one another, where that content grouping going to a landing page about those keywords still makes sense for the end user.
Awesome. And one more question for actually Konstantin, which I think afterwards we'll transition over to your section. We got a couple more here. So for Konstantin, do you have any other tips for turbocharging ad platforms? If not, which one would be your favorite among Josh's?
Yeah, so I agree with Josh that these two things are super important. And if I would choose what to do, I would definitely choose at least the second one, the the aggregation of the budgets into one campaign, and also in Facebook in as little number of ad sets per campaign as well. But if I add something as a data and technology provider, software company, I would recommend also like 1.5, 2 things. First, I agree with Josh that you need to collect Google Click ID and Facebook Click ID even more. You need to collect some kind of first-party cookie identifier for everyone on your website who submits the lead, and you need to pass this ID to your CRM system so that later you can use some kind of software. You can do it yourself. You can match your conversions that happen in your CRM to your online behavioral data. And that's not only needed for Facebook campaigns, Facebook paid campaigns, and Google paid campaigns, for all of your traffic on the website. And usually people use Google Analytics ID for that, which is available for everyone, not only people who came from the Google ad with Google Click ID. And the second thing, which is also maybe the first thing you do when you come as a digital marketer to anywhere to work, to start a new job, UTM tracking, standardization, like to make sure that your campaigns contain the most important information about what is this campaign about, what is the category, maybe some geo, is it branded keyword, non-branded keyword, etc. But also somewhere in the UTMs, you need to keep the automatic IDs for the campaign, ad group, and creative, the ad creative ID. By doing so, you'll make your life much easier to see your 360-degree analytics in terms of which channels brought what kind of conversions in the future, because these IDs are required to match your costs that are extracted from the advertising platform and your business outcomes that you have in your CRM.
Awesome. Thank you, Konstantin. Great insight. One last question from Zach Baker. What if there are a wide range of products and services and that range has a ton of different targets? Would Performance Max still be a good option?
Yeah, and Zach was kind enough to go back and forth with me. So really quick before directly answering, if that were actually an e-commerce question, the answer would be generally no. You should be looking at smart shopping campaigns for e-commerce, but what he's referring to are more service oriented. So it sounds more like recruiting for what he's talking about, but even if it's software as a service, this works too. The answer is, if you have a bunch of really specific offerings for really specific audiences, Performance Max is probably not the thing to test because it's meant for a large, broad audience and a single offer that makes a lot of sense to the big audience. What you would consider instead is having a large enough campaign to house all of your ad groups being your different individual audiences, and you give that campaign enough budget that it can be very liquid between the individual ad groups, and it will help really put them all out there, figure out which ones have the most volume and the highest propensity to perform, and it will elevate those to the ones that receive the spend from that campaign's budget. The thing to say on the tail end of that is you may find there's only 2 or 3 of, say, 30 ad groups you put in there that get any volume and get any leads. You may not care because that may be fine and revenue is revenue. But if that is the case and you do find that you need a wider distribution of where that spend is going, you can allow that campaign to do what it's doing. It's clearly highlighted 3 winners that it thinks exist. What you would then do is you would pause the remaining ad groups, move those into another campaign without those 3 winners, do the same thing again and sort of see what happens. And you can get a sense of which ships are rising with that tide in each campaign and at what budget levels. But that's where I would start. Be one general campaign, all your ad groups broken out for individual services, see where the money goes, and then sort of cut, paste, repeat down the line.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. All right. Well, without further ado, we've been teasing this the whole session. Let's get into the ultimate accelerant for data-driven automation. Konstantin, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. And Josh, thank you very much for such a great introduction to the topic and, stressing the importance of training the robots on the advertising platforms. So Jared, can you please go to the next slide? Yeah, so I'll talk about the same things that Josh was talking about, but with more automation, with putting what the ideas that Josh described, the core ideas in the modern digital marketing, to put them on drugs, and trying to put them to the next level and squeeze even more out of what performance you can extract from the relatively simple things you can do, what Josh recommended to do. And we are a software company. We provide a predictive marketing platform, and we structure our offering in 4 dimensions: targeting, optimization, measurement, and insights. That's basically why we named Tomi as an abbreviation. And it's, in my opinion, it's most important data-driven things that a digital marketer have to do in their day-to-day job. So find the relevant audience, optimize for the business outcomes, measure your results, and also get some insights and inspiration of what you need to do. And with Tomi.ai, our customers can scale their ads in terms of budget with the target return on advertising spend. They can increase ROAS in certain channels where they cannot do it without us. And most importantly, they increase the quality of the acquisition. So they focus their advertising on buying intent and high value customers. So let's go to the next slide. And we focus on businesses first with a really big challenge when these businesses have long sales cycles. And that happens in industries like banking, SaaS businesses, real estate, insurance, automotive, and even in e-commerce, in furniture or electronics categories. In all these industries and sectors, these companies have rare conversions. These conversions are happening offline, and these conversions are happening with a long delay, like weeks or sometimes months from the first website interaction. And because of that, the feedback loop with the advertising platform like Google, Facebook, or anything else is broken. So you cannot use the bottom of the funnel transaction event in any of these businesses, in most cases, because, like, for example, in real estate, when I was a digital marketer in a real estate company, you can easily have a purchase of a house that happens 0.01% of the time from the traffic you buy to the website. And it happens in 2 months from the ad that was clicked on. And no way you can use any like hack to pass that conversion and optimize for it. So the core idea that we exploit is finding that creating that kind of event that is frequent enough and correlated well with the business outcome in very much the sense that Josh described, looking into the funnel, going deeper to the funnel, getting more rare transactions, less frequent conversions, but they're more strong in terms of intent. So what we do in Tomi.ai, we use a real-time scoring of the website visitors by what they do on the website, where they go, where they click, how long they stay on the page, how they scroll the page, etc. And whenever the score of the user, whenever their expected lifetime value gets past certain threshold, we fire an event to Google and Facebook through a server-to-server APIs, and this event should happen, according to our experience, 5 to 10% for 5 to 10% of the website visitors, and also this event has a value, the predicted value for the future lifetime value for this customer, like meaning how much dollar amount of revenue you would expect from that particular website visitor. So in a sense, we create this, not a specific place in the funnel when we fire that event from the server to server kind of integration, not from the website as Josh was describing, as far as I understood. But it's like a combination of multiple customer journeys for this particular website visitor that in combination give the answer that, hey, this visitor will convert with 10% probability, and the expected check will be $12,000. So the value of that user is 12,000 multiplied by 10%, $1,200. That's the threshold. Above the threshold, we fire the event. So let's go to the next slide. Essentially, Jared, essentially what happens, we take a long cycle business, that's now focused to acquire leads, the leads from the website. Maybe this marketer is already optimizing for a lower funnel kind of lead, more kind of pre-qualified lead event, but still it's a lead, right? And the maximum what the marketer can do is to use the trick that Josh recommended. I highly recommend to do it as well. The bid cap kind of campaigns in Google and Facebook, target CPA or capped CPA as well, like some kind of that in Facebook. But the problem is that in these long cycle businesses, the quality of the leads vary a lot. Like if your conversion from a lead to a transaction is like 3%, sometimes it's even less. Most of the leads you generate from the website is just junk, and that's gives a lot of noise to the robots on the side of Google and Facebook. So our core idea at Tomi.ai is that we have to send not just a right frequency event, but also the event with a value attached to it, and switch even further, not to target CPA campaigns in Google and Facebook, but target ROAS campaigns to maximize for expected return on advertising spend you can get from that traffic. And by doing so, you push the robots on the side of Google and Facebook even further, not only optimizing for the quality leads, but also for the check of the leads, like their transaction volume in the future as well. And in a sense, we take these long cycle businesses and help the marketers there to become an e-commerce in the eyes of Google and Facebook, and to focus on, creating the great creatives, great ad copy, condense their budgets into a smaller amount of campaigns, and to optimize for that analog of revenue in e-commerce, which is frequent, almost online, and has value. In the next slide, I show just a simple explanation why value bidding is better than just bidding for a CPA-based kind of campaign, capped by bids, or just optimized for CPA. Happens because like if you have a variable quality of the lead, and you buy leads, for example, I don't know, for $12, and different leads will be of value to you below that threshold, above that threshold, and if you bid equally for the same cost per lead, you overbid on the lower quality leads, and you underbid on the higher quality leads, and you get less of them because your competitors will outbid you. And as a result, you are not getting the maximum business outcome in terms of revenue, your future revenue potential. And the ideal way is to do like people do in e-commerce, like to bid for expected return on advertising spend, ROAS, and bid higher on those who will bring more revenue to you, and bid lower on those who bring less revenue to you. That's the core, in terms of the next step from what Josh suggested to do is to not only to optimize for the right frequency event, but also add some value to it. And by the way, before doing Tomi.ai as a business and as a company, when I was a marketer myself, we were designing these events on the web with some logic to add some value to it. Like you can, use some simple logic in real time on the website with the JavaScript logic to set some value to that kind of event. And that already was, the next step. But with Tomi.ai, we do it with server-to-server integration, and we don't need to over-engineer on the front end of your website. The next slide, that's an additional layer to what I was describing. The fourth challenge some businesses have is that their value-based bidding is not that obvious. Even if you have done what I said, you still have to do some work, some homework, and to understand what is the value of your customer. Because like if you take, for example, bank, as a business, they acquire different types of customers. They sell credit cards, they sell mortgages, they sell products to small businesses, and all of these sales, they usually don't have an immediate revenue with them. And it's more like acquiring an account that will generate some lifetime value for the bank, moving forward. That's why the marketers in these complex organizations like banks, they are segmented, like they're segregated. Like some marketers optimize for lead qualified opportunities for credit cards. Some marketers optimize for mortgages approvals, etc. And they don't have the common denominator to what they can optimize for, because the understanding of what is the lifetime value for a particular customer happens within weeks or months after the signed contract. So with the predictive marketing approach, you can feed the training data set of transactions in a way of lifetime value, pre-calculated lifetime value for historical occurrences, and you can train the scoring for the website visitors towards that lifetime value, and you can put every marketer in a bank to a single business outcome in terms of a predicted score, like predicted lifetime value of this particular website visitor. On the next slide, some technical description on how we actually do our stuff. And as I said, we use server-to-server integrations. With that, we don't need to engineer something on the website of our customers, because that's complex. It depends on the website of the customer. It's really, and if you do something and you want to change it, you need to do something again on a website. With the conversion APIs from Facebook and conversion APIs from Google, and by the way, LinkedIn recently announced that they are adding conversion APIs as well. We can create synthetic events as we wish, almost in real time, by collecting real-time data from the website as streamed data flow, and we can generate that synthetic events in any kind of desired fashion and change it within minutes in our software. And also, what's great about it is that you'll probably know that in Facebook, with the changes that iOS and Apple made last year, it's really important to have these 8 golden conversions, right? That you can use for optimization in Facebook. And in a company like a bank where you have multiple conversions for optimization, or if you have a really detailed funnel with multiple conversions, you need to be really strategic in terms of which conversion to pick. With the server-side integration, you pick one conversion, you name it, I don't know, expected lifetime value conversion, and then you just use this single conversion for every line of the business, in the same way as a large e-commerce company is optimizing for revenue in multiple categories, in books category, in electronics category, in whatever. Like you don't use different conversions for revenue for an e-commerce website, right? So this is the technical integration on the ingestion side and getting the data. So we get behavioral data from the website, some product information that may be relevant for machine learning, some external information sometimes, for some customers, like credit score in a bank, and also the revenue and LTV data from the CRM, like this ground truth signal we want to optimize for. Then our machine learning platform takes historical data for behavior, historical data for actual conversions, which particular lead actually converted. And here, as I said, in answering the previous question, it's super important to have this unique cookie ID to link the online behavior on the website with the actual revenue and LTV data from your CRM. So whenever we have 1 or 2 months of data, we train the models that use the behavior, online behavior from the website, and predict the score for the lifetime value of these users. And then we can apply that models in close to real time to every new website visitor. And whenever website visitor gets a certain value calculated by this model above a threshold, so we know that it will be like top 5-10% kind of website visitor, we trigger a server-side event to Google and Facebook, and that's our first use case for optimization in Google and Facebook. And Microsoft, Bing, and LinkedIn are also coming to that capability. But also we have other use cases on the same predictive lifetime value models. Predictive lead scoring, it's really close to what Josh was describing by this, an amazing trick with the pre-landing page, when you kind of use simple quiz question to qualify your lead and create like lead scoring, right? So, but this lead scoring has only like 0 and 1. 1 for those who answered yes or answered 5,000 what was SS under the wealth kind of metric.
Over 500,000.
Yeah. So this lead scoring has like 2 numbers, 0 or 1. With our approach, we basically have a spectrum. So every lead that is generated on a website gets almost a real-time lead score, which is from 0 to 1 for a conversion into a purchase, and some dollar-nominated value in terms of revenue. And here you can not only optimize for the right event in the first use case, but in the second one, you also can streamline your sales operations. You can focus on, usually like top 25% of the leads by this score generate 50 or 70% of your future revenue. So you place your best salespeople to deal with the most high intent leads. And usually, sometimes in some businesses, the bottom half of the leads by this score, brings only 5% of the revenue. Like these are low intent, low quality leads. And you can, you don't even need to call them back, maybe. You can save some expensive cost of, closing the leads and automate that with IVR, some email messages. And only if you get a second, reaction from that low intent leads, you call them back and try to convert them. And last but not least is the measurement part, the predictive attribution. We already have the score for every website visit. We can sum up these scores for every channel, every campaign, every click from an ad set, and estimate the return on advertising spend even before the revenue happened, even before lifetime value realized for an account in a bank. And I remind you that we work with long cycle businesses. It can be weeks or months before you see the results of your work as a marketer. So, you run a campaign this week and you wait 4 weeks to understand, did this campaign generate revenue to you? With the predictive approach, you can know the quality of your traffic already next day. So the next slide is the last one. And here, I just show some typical use case that we have with our customers. When we come and help our customers to start optimizing, not for a cost per lead, or sometimes even, for cost per click, but for more like bottom of the funnel metrics, focusing on revenue rather than prospects and leads. And when we do the change and customers start, the change is very small. Like they need to now optimize for a new event that they get in their ad platform, like this new incremental lifetime value metric that we send to them through server to server. And when they start doing it, usually the cost per click grows because they bid for the higher quality traffic. The cost per lead grows almost every time, because now they don't, buy cheapest leads, they buy quality leads. But what we see, for all of the cases, in some rare exceptions where our approach is just not working, like if the cycle is not that long, that the cost per order drops because the conversion from lead to order becomes much better. So the advertising platform starts to generate more quality, higher converting leads. And in addition to that, if the business has variable pricing or variable lifetime value for the customer, the advertising platform also learns to show the ads to those people who will likely be with higher order values. And that also adds additional multiple on the overall return on advertising spend. So here I show like improvement in return on advertising spend to 2x. We achieved that kind of improvement with some customers, but on average we are able to reach 40 to 60% improvement in ROAS for long cycle businesses. And in expensive e-commerce businesses, like I said, expensive electronics or furniture, we were able to achieve 10 to 20% ROAS improvement, which is also, a great deal. That's it. Thank you very much, and it's really a pleasure to be in this crowd with Josh and Jared. People who really got that, point that we are, as marketers, we are running a bunch of robots somewhere, somewhere in the cloud, in Google and Facebook. We have to make them, smart, and we have to teach Google and Facebook robots how to bring the right click to our website.
Konstantin, thank you. That was fantastic, and the numbers you just rattled off were very impressive. Like that's 40 to 60% improvement is nothing to shake a stick at. You know, that's pretty amazing. So last, before we wrap, any final questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat. We got a couple minutes left. Konstantin, I have a question. So what's like an example? I'm curious about maybe like a win story of a client that you've had, kind of like put some color on like how a company used Tomi.ai to like realize these gains, right? Maybe a SaaS example, a real estate example. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so how we usually work with our customers, we do pilots. So we let our customers to test the software. So the customer comes, they usually do some integration, which is not as hard. You can go to the slide 36, just for visuals. And the customer needs to do 3 things. Install a pixel on the website that collects the behavioral data, make the CRM integration, either with the custom uploads of leads and sales that happen, or with one-click integrations with like major CRM systems like HubSpot, for example. And the third thing is to give the API credentials to send the data as conversions and audiences to Google and Facebook. That usually happens within the first 2 weeks, sometimes longer if the business is more complex. And then we collect some training data, about a month of data, initial kind of setup to train the first model. And after that, when the model is ready, we start sending the synthetic predictive events to ad accounts of our customers. And usually our customers take 4 to 8 weeks to launch a rigid A/B test to test their current approach by optimizing for leads, target CPA or something like that, versus optimizing for a new conversion event that we pass to them and optimize for the target ROAS value of that event. And then they look at their 360-degree analytics system that they have in place, or they use our dashboards to see that they're starting to get more actual conversions that this both types of campaigns generated, A and B campaigns. And whenever they see the delta in test versus control, they just start rolling out the new approach and try new channels with it and change the optimization target in the ad platform.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you, Konstantin, and thank you, Josh. Guys, this was a fantastic session. I learned a ton. I hope you all learned a ton too, and have some takeaways that you can go and start using the train robots in your own campaigns today. So before we wrap, one housekeeping item. If you guys want the recording of this, please feel free to go to the LinkedIn event and just comment recording on it and on the post, and we will DM you the recording as soon as it's live, so you guys can review it on your own time. One last question from Natalia. I realize we're at time. Thank you, Silvio. What are the restrictions to your approach?
Yeah, so I would name 2 challenges with our approach. First, it's not just technical change on the side of our customers to optimize for a new signal, but it's also change in philosophy inside. If the organization, the marketing organization, was built to bring leads and sales are demanding leads from them, it's they need to change their approach and philosophy that not every lead is good, right? So they need to change their how they manage the business and start measuring the quality of the leads and starting to demand from marketing more sales, eventual sales. As I show you on my last slide, usually the cost per lead increases with our approach, and that can be a friction, and people need to embrace the new approach and start optimizing for the revenue.
Sense. It's a new mindset. We gotta adapt to the times. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been fantastic. Like I said, if you'd like the recording, just head right over to that link to the LinkedIn event and drop a comment for that. And we'll get that right over to you once it's ready. And yeah, hope to see you guys on a future event. Thank you guys so much for joining.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.